is, well, so I always like telling how Americans are very different. The penultimate American, Anyway, I'll get to that.
Hopefully
story.
that's a good thing.
It is. I'll get to that story later. So Dylan, I forget when Dojo was founded, like in 2004. So Dylan was working with JavaScript before JavaScript was even usable, which demonstrates a lot of patience and knowledge and whatnot. He's been very vocal with TypeScript, and he's been very vocal in the open source community. He is one of the most patient people I have ever met. He is like the biggest worker I have ever met. He is the one that's currently driving this startup really hard, and he is doing a very good job of it. So I'm not sure. I haven't rehearsed this, so I'm like,
that's the beauty of stuff. You just go.
Yeah.
Like startups don't have time to practice talks. We just do it.
Yeah. So it's kind of like between the two of us, there's this balance where I'm like I'm mostly a technical person, and he is like you all went in here and met him, and I was like standing on the side. So that's like we balance each other out. So I'm not sure whether I can do I hope I gave it justice,
That's great. Yeah, okay. That's cool. I think, the coolest thing about this, like I wake up at like 3 or 4 in the morning, and Nemanja is kind of a late riser. So our time zones, 8 or 9 hours apart, overlap almost perfectly. Some days I think I'm around before you, and it's like 4 a.m. my time, and I've barely had a cup of coffee. And you're like, why are you up so early? And I'm like, this is the best time of day to be awake. So yeah, it's kind of fun. So anyway, I figured we'd talk a bit about Living Spec and some of the things we're doing. We'll do a demo. We'll talk a bit about the tech. We'll talk a bit about our journey as a startup. Is there any requests on like what you'd like us to talk about more? Like what would be interesting to you to hear about Living Spec?
Can I ask a question right away?
Yes.
How did you two meet?
It's an odd story. So my father for like 20 years has introduced me to people who were never a good fit, like for anything. And a couple of years ago, my father's like, oh, you should talk to this guy, Dan, right? And so I talked to this guy, Dan, and he's rambling on about stuff that's not interesting to me. And he's like, and then he mentions Living Spec for like 3 sentences, and then moves on to the next. I'm like, wait. I want to hear about that. That's like a thing I've been wanting to work on for years. And so we just started talking more and more. And then we got, I think the first time we talked, it was probably like 2 hours of us just talking back and forth, like, oh, have you thought about this? He's like, yeah, but I've thought about that. And I've thought about this. And it was just like an instant like riffing session on a problem we'd both wanted to solve for like more than 10 years. So it was just like this magical moment of like, wow, this person halfway across the world has the same like desire to solve these sets of problems that I do. And that's really rare to find, I think. So it's kind of cool. So dumb luck really is the short answer. So yeah, so sorry, anything else that would be interesting or any questions before we really get into it? Like be brave, be bold, I don't care. We can talk about anything, like this is flexible. All right, so I guess, and then by the way, there are, we have a couple t-shirts to give away for the best question and either the most ridiculous or worst question. So that means no bad questions are discouraged just as much as good questions. So feel free to just blurt out questions or say what you want. Like we're here for you to have fun. So, and the reason we kind of like this format is you're like, well, this isn't even like a slide deck. What is this crap, right? Well, this is actually our product. And it's not meant for slideshows, but we just put all of our ideas into our product as if it was a spec for a talk, because that's kind of how we think in this like sort of connected, organized thinking way. So we're just gonna like talk through ideas, and if we're bored, we'll just skip on to something else. So why don't you tell them about some of the problems we want to solve if you feel like it, or I can, but I talk a lot and it doesn't. So I feel like I'm like the person talking 99% of the time. So I'll just, well, you want to take this one?
No, go ahead, and I'll go ahead. You're in the flow.
All right. So like the biggest problem I find with software engineering is like you're ready to get in the zone, you're ready to do some coding, and fuck, what am I building? Like, and you look at the details you have, and it's like, figure this out later, or to be determined, or wait, like this is clearly flawed. This is not like what we talked about last week. Or wait a minute, I have this information here, but I know I read somewhere else that something that's different than this. And you're just trying to make sense of like what you're building and why. And that's the classic problem we're trying to solve. And you would think like this is an easy problem to solve, but it's not, because we are inherently disorganized. We often talk, we often don't write things down. We create like 50 versions of the same thing because we're just kind of sloppy, or we just kind of get tired of something. So we just redo it again, or we pick up a new tool. And I think you saw this like to the extreme at one of your companies, right?
A lot of my companies, but like one was very interesting because it was a big and old .NET project, like 20 years old, written in Visual Basic, C#, whatnot. And never mind the person that wrote it left, it was all the business left as well. So like you had an app and you had features and you had feature requests, and we were like, yeah, but why is that one there? You know, you're supposed to change it. And it was like, we don't know. There's no one to ask. Everyone left, you know? So what you do is you sit down and you kind of contact the entire team, and we kind of, you know, look at it and pray and whatnot. And in the end, we hope we made the best decision, but there's no history. We don't know why things are there and why they're not there and whatnot. So like it was, and that was for every single thing in the project. You know, every single decision you have to make, you first have to think very hard, why is this code there, and whether there was a business decision behind it, and not like a, you know, a moment of brilliance from one of the devs. So yeah, I guess that sums it up.
My favorite experience would always be you're like 90% done with a project and someone new gets hired. And they're like, why did you use that framework instead of this other framework? And, you know, like they're new to the company, new to the project. And it's like, well, we actually have reasons, but we don't have time to explain them to you. But if you have like a shared history of what you've done and why, you can see like, oh, well, if your framework meets all 50 of these things and it did so like a long time ago, great, but it doesn't. So like piss off basically, right? So it's kind of a nice way to like stop endless debate by having like a full history of what you've done and why. But it's really hard to do it in a coherent way with the existing solutions on the market. And a lot of it is like, things are chores. Like it's really easy to create lots of tasks, and it's really painful to close all those tasks. And it's really easy to create another document, but it's really painful to have to read another document where people have just dumped all the information in and not bothered to clean it up. And so we find there's just lots of friction and lots of avoidance of things. And this is like a great metaphor. This is my son. He likes to make his appearance sometimes. And he likes to do chores just for Living Spec. He doesn't actually do chores like this, you know, but the point is like, I'm tired of stuff feeling like chores all the time. And to me, like, if I have to close, like, it's really easy for someone to open 50 tickets on me, and it's really tedious and painful for me to close all of those tickets. So I want to streamline that process and get rid of that friction. And a lot of that, I think, is that a lot of the things we do are often disconnected. The process is, you know, not together, not in one place. I think you had the extreme experience of this at another customer of yours. Yeah.
Oh, well. So anyway, basically, there's also one thing I wanted to add on top of that is that not everyone shares the same view of the thing they're working on, and it's just, you know, it's always like that. So in one instance, we had the system where the business requirements came into one system. I forget the name. We didn't have access to it. And then they trickle down to Jira, where they get like copied and pasted and then converted like into tasks and whatnot. But again, devs didn't really like it. So devs and the project and Scrum Masters and whatever the hell the organization was. So it came into Excel next. So we had, first system, Jira, Excel. And it wasn't enough because this was an agile company and all the walls were like whiteboards and whatnot. It was very fancy. And then there were like agile manifesto writings on the walls. It was incredible.
That's how you know you're agile.
Oh,
the manifestos on the wall.
Or in
Absolutely.
The yeah. It's one of those too.
Yep.
Anyway, so then they take Excel, write it onto the walls and make sense of it. I mean, it's very clear because everyone views the same data differently. But guess what? In the end, they had to, you know, get the walls into Excel, Excel into Jira, and Jira into the first system because, you know, it's the business that, you know, needs to have the final, you know, view of the data. It's not the devs. It's not the you know, project managers. It's the business. So basically, what that little exercise showed me is that a lot of stuff gets lost, and also that you cannot view the same data and expect it that everyone, like, you cannot expect everyone to view the same data and work on it. You really have to let people make sense of them in their own way, which we kind of, we work on solving by, you want to pick that up. You did most of the development work. You did the stuff.
Yeah, I think integration, the only thing worse than using Jira is integrating with it or writing the code to integrate with it. I think I spent a good couple months making that one work.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think a lot of the thing is we don't expect to like replace every system everyone uses. That would be ridiculous. So instead we need to find a way to work with the systems people use and augment them, or provide a nice layer on top of them to be able to connect ideas together. I don't remember the number of times where I've been looking for the Google Doc that contains the information I need. And of course, there's like 50 Google Docs that are very similar and they're not easy to find and they're not connected together. And so for us, you kind of create a top level document and then you create pages under that document so that even if you have 5 versions of the same thing, you know where to look because it's all contained within this like one nice little tree, which, can get kind of out of control. But the idea is that like, if we can connect things together and that's a cheap thing to do, then it's easy to find things and it's easy to remember where things are. And it's easy to sort of build up information over time and learn patterns and do all these magical things that happen when you like bring ideas together and connect them together. Then it's like you learn more things than you realize. Like what's kind of cool is we get these like clusters. Oh, that's in a different diagram, but you can kind of get these like clusters of focus. So you're like, oh, like this one little red thing here impacts these 10 other things. I better fix that thing versus this one little red thing over here is like only connected to one other thing in like my specs. It's probably not that important. It's probably not so urgent that I needed to mark it red, which for us corresponds to urgency. And in many ways, we're just inherently disorganized people. Like we don't like to take out the trash. We don't like to do the chores. But so if we can have a system that like makes it easier to do that and makes it so the product manager doesn't have to do all the work to like chase after everyone and be on every call and make make note of everything. But instead, like we can all kind of shove junk together at this thing and then eventually clean it up over time. Like no one writes a perfect spec in one sitting, right? But if you don't write things down, then no one can come along and clean it up or add their ideas or make suggestions. And so my first Living Spec was actually in 2004. And I was working on an early JavaScript framework called Dojo, which at one time was like much bigger than all the ones you've heard of. And my co-founder, Alex Russell, and I were sitting in a coffee shop in Mountain View, and we both like to type. We hated having to sit there and watch the other person type because we'd be like, you're using the wrong like keyboard shortcuts. Oh, you're using tabs instead of spaces, like all the classic, arguments you have in your early 20s. And so we found this like brand new editor. I mean, this is before Google Docs existed. I mean, before Gmail, like before all these cool tools we take for granted. And but we found this tool called Edit, which was like a real-time collaborative editor. And we sat there with our laptops face to face, in the most hipsterish way. We both had PowerBooks at the time, which was like really awesome. And we're sitting like, having our cappuccinos. And we wrote just like a 20-line spec together, like all the features Dojo should have. So it should have modules and widgets and data stores and a build tool and like all these things we thought a modern JavaScript framework should have at the time. And we wrote it and we iterated on it together in one sitting and we published it on our website. And the cool thing about that was we got our ideas out there. Now, none of those things were finished specs. It was really high level stuff. But what happened is people were interested in what we were doing and they started taking bits and pieces of it and writing sub-specs related to those concepts. And 2 years later, I mean, it was shock. Everything on that list was done. So when Dojo 1.0 shipped in like 2006, the entire Living Spec for Dojo 1.0 was complete. But if we hadn't written that down, it would have never happened because people were able to quickly like see our high level vision and then expand upon it. And over the years, I've been like waiting for a system to come along that would like make it possible for an entire team to collaborate on a spec in the most efficient way possible. And I get really frustrated. Like when something takes like 5 clicks and it should take 1 or 2, I just want to like throw like my computer away, right? Like I am the most impatient person out there in terms of like things not being fast and efficient and usable. And so like I find lots of systems force you into a particular way of thinking, or you pick a structure, and like, oh, that's stupid, I want to throw it out. And you're like, oh, I got to start over. Well, and then starting over means you're just going to go back to Word or Google Docs or Jira tickets. It doesn't mean you're going to like re-architect the structure. So when you force people into data models that they don't know if it's right, they're going to keep churning and reiterating and redoing those data models, and then they're going to be stuck in some pattern, and then it's just going to die. So our thought process is we need something as open and flexible as a document, because otherwise you have to like throw things away regularly, or they become too rigid and people won't use them. They're like, oh, I hate that system. I got to fill in 50 fields in a form before I can just like put my one bit of notes down. I want to be able to have my idea at 3 in the morning and just type in 2 sentences and be done with it, and then clean it up later. So there's a lot of interesting thoughts that go on there. But what's kind of cool is like, this is a screenshot of our spec. And you're like, whoa, that's like impossible to follow. But like what's cool is this concept of being able to automatically aggregate all the data that we have. And Nemanja does a much better job explaining this than me. But this is just a visualization of the power of being able to say, well, if I've got all this information connected together, what can I learn about it? What can I see? What can I observe? Like, why is this area so red all over the place? I wouldn't have noticed that if I just had a list of tasks, or if I just had a bunch of disconnected systems. I wouldn't know that this thing is urgent or important.
Yeah, I mean, in software, what we're taught from the very beginning is like, when things get kind of large, you start creating sections or modules or whatever people like calling them. So like, if you have 10 things in a folder, you create like 3 folders, and then you have less things to think about. And there's science behind that. People can like think about 7 plus minus, keep 7 plus minus 2 things in their head. So we really want to have like small pages so that we can follow what a page contains. But that raises a new problem, because if you create smaller pages, well, what's in them? Now instead of seeing everything on the screen, you suddenly have to click 2 or 3 levels deep, which isn't ideal, because then you don't see what you can't follow what's in there. So why not do what Google does and basically crawl the things that are beneath what we're looking at? So an aggregation in our world basically means, if you have a page, why not start from that page, get into all the pages it links to in some fashion, either directly or indirectly, and gather all the data and show it to the user. That way you have a nice small page of, which consists of 5 things, and yet you see all the aggregated info. You can see there are 20 tasks, 20 tasks, 15 of them need urgent attention, or there are 30 comments waiting for your answer. You don't want to fish around pages in order to find that. You really want it aggregated. You really want it in front of you. So that was one of the first ideas we had when we were like starting to break stuff down into pages. So you can do very fun things with aggregation, such as this graph, because all the red bits basically means that something somewhere within this tree needs urgent attention. Therefore, everything along the same path should be needs urgent attention.
Who have a question?
And what you describe is quite relevant. When I think about what we do, we have like PowerPoint, even in addition Excel, of course, Jira, I'm telling you. But then we try to aggregate everything in Wiki, and then we end up with what you describe as basically, you have to go all the way down the list. So you're trying to solve something like that.
Yeah. So like, the question for people watching online was, you have all these disconnected things, and then you try to bring them all back together and aggregate them. And that's exactly both like the beauty and the problem of solving it, right? And you can even think of it of like different views and different perspectives on things, like one of Nemnja's earlier stories, which is like, the CEO wants to see like a bunch of green lights. They want to know that everything in my company is running smoothly. Maybe they want to look down a level or 2, but probably only at the things that are red. to find out what's wrong. They probably don't want to know that there's like 4 Jira tickets open and like you have to like implement the internationalization logic to fix the typo here, right? They probably don't care about that level of depth, but someone does. But the CEO can't get that accurate view of what's going on in their organization if all these systems are disconnected, because they're just seeing the shiny PowerPoint that someone created for them that said, everything's fine, coach. You're like, great, but like, why are we 6 months behind schedule? Well, because there's all these messy bugs that you don't care about, right? But so if you can actually like connect these things together, people in different parts of the organization, when the organization is large, can look at different slices that are interesting to them. And that is, so in many ways, like we're trying to like aggregate things, but we're also trying to teach people how to do like good information architecture for their projects. So like if you shove everything into one page, you're not gonna be able to find anything. If you create 50 million pages, you're not gonna be able to find anything. So like what's the right level? And it's gonna change over time. Early on, your product concept is really simple and really short. So you don't need to go to that level of depth that you do when you're like 3 years in and you've done a lot of work and the product's really big. So the idea is to like create more of like an adaptable aggregation, information architecture, systems integration stuff that evolves with you over time, rather than being something like, oh, I got to set up the perfect system today that's going to meet my needs for the next 3 years, because we all know that's not realistic and it's not going to happen. Yeah. So I think we might do a demo. But I mean, the cool thing is we've been using the product here. We just haven't been using it in an interesting way. So, and let's all pray to the demo gods. This is always the scary part of demos.
In a way that could break it.
Yeah,
Yes. Oh, wow.
So here, I think everyone's heard of this device called an iPod. Let's pretend it's like 2001 and the iPod has not yet reached the marketplace, okay? And Steve Jobs says to his team, I would love to create a music device that has 1,000 songs in your pocket and 10 hours of battery life. Like, well, that's a spec. I mean, it's a back of a napkin spec, but it's a spec, right? And then you start to add ideas to it. So you're like, well, okay, what does 1,000 songs in your pocket mean? And it's like, well, I could support different formats. I can add things to my device. Well, what does that mean? Well, like, all right, I've got a task there. But now I've got like these other ideas someone has added. And it'd be really cool if I could quickly convert those to tasks. You want to convert those to tasks?
Should I? Oh, sorry, that was cute.
Yeah.
No. Okay.
We've not practiced this demo. We've never used our
practiced.
product before. It's
I
great.
had a beer as well.
Oh, but look at that. We just magically turned like our entire rest of our list into tasks. I'm like, hey, you know what, dude? Like, hey, this thing you did from headphones, like that's not a task. You know why? Because like I got to define like what's a headphone and what's the port and what's the jack. And so like you made it a task, but that's got to be like its own spec page. So I'm going to take this task, I'm going to convert it into a page, because I know for headphones, well, okay, that's cool. But I know that it's really got to be like the port format, the headphone size. Is it wireless? Well, this is 2001. That's not realistic, right? But but so the thing is, a lot of times we create tasks and we're stuck, and we have all these interesting discussions in tasks. But those discussions, if they become an interesting part of our spec, we shouldn't have to go back and copy all that content out and recreate it as a spec page. We should just be able to say, hey, convert it to a spec page and I'm done. Or, you know what, I had a bunch of noise somewhere. Let's see, where did I do that noisiness? I added a bunch of extra notes here today. I'm like, this is not the right place for this, you know what? And so I am just going to move it. I think that's the right thing. Yeah, I'm going to move that to a different page, right? And so I just, well, I don't know why I did that. That's interesting, but whatever. I basically know I need to move content around, right? And I know if I like have it in this one spot and I try to just copy and paste, I'm probably going to lose some formatting, or I'm going to break something, or something wrong is going to happen. So I want to be able to just like click a button and move stuff to a different place, like to clean it up over time. So these are like early ideas. They're still kind of conceptual, but like we're trying to like look for all those friction points where you could make a mistake, or you could be slowed down, or you could waste time, or like, hey, I really like this. I want to turn this into a snippet, right? And the formatting here looks a little horrible because we zoomed it in so you can see it, right? but like, I want to take this and make it a reusable snippet, and I want to share that reusable snippet with my teammate so they can follow my consistent formatting. Or we do like monthly updates for our investors to Living Spec. Like, that's kind of a tedious process, but we have a snippet, and you know what? We paste it and we share it, and like, we're done with our investor updates in like 10 minutes, because we've basically thought through the process of like, how do I make content and share it and reuse it in the most efficient way possible. There are lots of different things we can do in Living Spec. We can integrate with task systems. We can, where did our diagram go? Oh, there's the click wheel. Oh yeah, you can like drag images in, you can turn words into pages, turn words into tasks, you can cross-reference pages and tasks. Pretty much anything you can think of doing in terms of like organizing information without the friction of having to like do a strict form structure we try to do. We put our tasks side by side, and it's like, I didn't assume you were done with that task and close it on you, because that's kind of like me thinking I know better than you. So it is, you can kind of like work through a list of tasks one by one. So we could update, like if you have 10 tasks on a page, you just click on it, update it, click on it, update it, click on it, update it, and just kind of be done with them one by one. So when you like do a sprint plan, you might like update all your tasks at the end of the week in like 2 minutes or the end of the day or whatever. These are just some of the workflows we do. We do a lot of use cases where we kind of define like, the scope, the actor, the success criteria, but you don't have to use that format. We just support lots of flexibility, but then we give you lots of ideas for the kinds of things you might want to do when you're managing a project. A lot of people use Living Spec for things that aren't software. We focus primarily on the software use case, but you could really use it for organizing or collecting ideas about almost any project you want to do. I think that's enough of a demo. Anyone here tonight, if you sign up for the beta, we'll give you access and you can have at it, and it's free at the moment. And we'll always have a free tier. Eventually we'll charge for some features, but we have all that information. We don't have a good UI for it yet, but we track. So let's talk about the tech stack, because that'll actually.
It's kind of difficult because if I change something in his name,
right?
So
no, we'll know it's you.
by mistake.
We'll know it's you.
Yeah, by mistake. But
Yeah.
he couldn't find it. So if he have a kind of way to discover.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk tech stack. So we didn't list it on there, but basically we have an event-driven architecture that pretty much tracks every change of the system. And we're just actually working right now on like the right level of depth of information of like what changed and what notifications to give you and things like that. So it's actually something we're working on currently, actually. So it is a thing we want to expose and make available.
Kind of access control in this one.
There is, yeah.
So, for example, I have an issue as a product. So if I want to share something with customers and with my team, so it's different kind of, someone can edit, someone can just or comment. So
yeah. So like for this entire talk tonight, you have been viewing right here a read-only view of it. But this is like the writable view that has the editor, and I can make changes. So you can currently do like read only, moderator, or admin. Admin can add users and modify that. Moderator can modify content, but not change user roles. Read only can just read it. And then there's like a public view that you can enable or disable to just share a link with someone that has none of the controls, but lets you see the information and share it with people. So we do like our change log as a public document. So you can see each week what we shipped. And it's really good for us because it's like, after 3 months of like brutal work, you're like, oh, we got nothing done. And then we can look at our change log, like, oh, wow, we got a lot of work done. This is great. This is cool. But it's really a quick way to share it with the world. So, if someone's like, hey, what have you guys been up to? We're like, here's a link, and just show you what we've done. And so it's kind of neat. There are areas we could improve on, I think, still. Like right now, we don't have a good way to partially share part of a spec, and we still need to figure out what that would look like. Like, how do you restrict which pages someone could see and things like that are still something we need to work on. But, you can't figure, a product like this takes 5 to 10 years to perfect.
As well, kind of, if you have a product, so you design something and you have kind of issues, page for issues or something like that. So if you find an issue, are the screenshots, all this stuff, so
Yep.
you can share with someone else only this section.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, that is the event. We don't do that yet, but we will. Right now, it's kind of you have access to the full document or you don't. But the one-off answer is like, let's just create a new document for that person, and then they can share feedback with us, and then we can like, replicate it back into our own document. But eventually, we want to be able to say like this page or this portion of the spec has a different set of users than this other part. We don't yet know how we're going to do that, but that's like the beauty of startups. You can't possibly know everything up front, so you just work at it, and then you come up with new problems and new use cases, and you solve them. Yeah, and you evolve your spec. Exactly. So I would like to say our logo is because we employ hexagonal architecture. It's kind of retrospective, like cheating, but we employ a hexagonal architecture, and we use like kind of your typical modern TypeScript stack. Nemanja, I'm sure would love to talk more about this or not. I don't know.
Well, yeah, the fun story about just the stack was I had a brilliant idea of doing isomorphic JavaScript apps, meaning having both JavaScript on the back end and the front end to ease recruitment and have more, find more developers because it's the same stack. Oh God, that went badly.
Our hiring slide is next.
Apparently people weren't really used to that in the beginning, and the tech wasn't really there yet. So if you guys ever use some of the frameworks, I mean, I'll explain to later, just so that I don't bore everyone to death here. But like there are so many issues. But anyway, it's like a TypeScript. We use TypeScript. We use React, and the only thing, I mean, I think it's a pretty standard front-end stack. It's just the way we use it is because it's kind of front-end and back-end. It's kind of isomorphic. We use certain things at both ends, so there's a bit of custom design there as well. The only thing that's kind of an outlier, I believe, is Raven, our database.
It's a document database that's not as well known as some other databases, but it gives us a lot of really nice features that save us a lot of time.
So, with hexagonal, we kind of wanted to support a lot of future use cases, which I think we did. So for instance, your question about access control, we could theoretically support access control on pages. It's just representing it that's problematic. You have to make it sensible to people, and it's kind of difficult to make out all the details. So you have to tell the person, okay, you're sharing this document, but then you don't have access to the subset of pages. So then we have to kind of represent it, kind of extract certain meaningful aggregations and whatnot.
Yeah, like most of our challenges are the UI.
Yeah.
What's the right UI that's not going to feel like a chore? You don't want to have to answer 50 questions to share a page. You just want to share a page. And then you want to know what you did so you can adjust it later. And those are the things that are hard to figure out. And I would say similarly, like we spent a lot of time on our rich text editor. We leverage a couple of open source projects, Slate and Plate. Plate is like plugins for Slate. And they're open source projects, and open source projects you can like contribute to. And like a few weeks of contributing to Plate, suddenly I'm like a maintainer on Plate, and I'm like the #2 contributor, which is kind of crazy. And then Slate hadn't like answered a number of my questions recently. So I was like, hey, do you guys want some help? And so they're like, here's the keys. And now I'm like the lead maintainer, like not in name, but like in practice for this other open source project, which wasn't really my intent, but like we need it to work because like we're building a company on top of these open source dependencies. So it's kind of like I had sent Nemanja a screenshot of like, hey, look, I'm the newest Slate maintainer. He's like, haha, that's funny. I'm like, no, really, they gave me access. So I can like do releases and push commits and stuff. And
I have to butt in here. That's what I meant by the penultimate American. He asked and he got push permissions to repository. And I woke up in the morning. I was like, that's a joke, isn't it?
You're like, nice photoshopping. No, that's real. I just did a release, and like just kind of like one of the things you learn living in the Bay Area where I lived for a while is if you don't ask, it won't happen. So you have to ask, or you have to write it down. If you don't do those things, nothing interesting happens in life. I think at least. Yeah. So we are, I would say, for our core dependencies, we're an open source first project company. And what that means is we will actually make the fix to the open source project before we do it to our own product. And the reason for that is like, I hate maintaining duplicated code. I hate maintaining a fix and then trying to retrofit it back into the open source project. It's better for me to fix it on like the lowest source possible and then upstream it. So we often fix things in our dependencies before we fix it in our product because we think that's the right way to do it. Most companies don't operate that way, but I think it's a really empowering way for people to know that like, hey, if this is a fix for open source, just go make it. Don't like wait and ask permission, just go fix it. And then we'll, address it later in our own product. And a lot of that is kind of the fun of the journey. You think like you're going to have this nice, straightforward linear path. This is like Bellagio, Italy. And then you find yourself editing LED masks. You're like, what happened along the way? So Neman started Living Spec a little bit before me, but I think now we sort of are co-founders because we've been building this company together full time for about a year and a half now. You did like a demo day here in 2019, right?
Yeah, I was here in, was it?
I think maybe it was 2020. I don't know. The years fly by, right?
They do. Yeah, we did a demo day here. I'm not sure whether anyone like saw us here and whatnot. We did the best demo that one time, and from there we kind of slowly.
It's all gone downhill since then, right?
Yeah.
Demos have just gotten worse
like
and worse.
Marvin from the Hitchhiker's Guide. It was terrible, and then the next couple million years were awful, and then it went downhill. So yeah, so basically after that demo, I was, Dylan, I'm not sure when you joined after that.
It was right around then.
Was it?
Okay. It was like within a month or two of that.
Can I tell the story about the pitch deck?
Sure.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Go for it.
So anyway, Dylan joined because it was obvious that I needed help with the business side, and we really needed that push. So I remember when Dylan joined, we did our first pitch deck, and it was just, we did our best, but we didn't have that much experience. We didn't have the feel what we needed to do. So we just were honest. So what we did was, in the team section, we put our current team. And
which included some advisors and people trying to help us and whatnot.
Right. We thought we were doing a good thing. We were just kind of trying to be honest. And the first response we got was, you can't have this many white people on a pitch deck.
Well, it was the worst. It was like, you got 5 white dudes.
5 white dudes.
How are you going to get funded with that? And it was kind of funny, but it was also kind of like honest. Like, are you building a team of like homogeneity, or are you building a product that everyone in the world will use? Exactly. Like, yeah. And the thing is, it was more like I just added my name on it and like put my picture on, and then they sent it to someone and they're like, what's this? Like, what's going on here? Right. So obviously we've rectified that since then. But it was just one of those things where like you think you're like going down the right path, and it turns out like, incorporating early as a startup is actually a bad idea, because that starts the clock running for when you're expected to have been successful. So if you like do all the formal process first before you figured out your product, you've actually like shortened your cycle for like how long you'll be considered like a venture-backed startup, right? Because you've started the clock too early. So like sometimes it's better to like not even incorporate until you have funding, because like why make people think you started sooner than you had? And there's like a lot of interesting things to learn that way. Or don't actually ever send a pitch deck to someone unless you have to, because a pitch deck is actually used to tell you why they won't invest in you. So like first person's like 5 white dudes. Nope. Like, an immediate way to say no to a company without really taking the time to get to know them, because you're just like looking for reasons to say no because you're a VC and you get like 1,000 offers a week and you just don't care about most of them. So you're just trying to get rid of things on the list. So we learned a lot. Like I had run all right. So actually kind of funny story. So my previous company I started in 2000, right when the .com bubble burst. And then I sold my stake in that company 2 months before COVID happened so I could work on Living Spec. So like once every 20 years, I'm really good at timing, or really bad, depending on your perspective. So then we were like, all right, so we need to raise money. And we're like, well, we've got a product, like we'll raise like $2 million, no problem, like super easy, which is like cute when you think like, you see people like raising lots of money with like zero effort. But what then you learn is like, oh, but they already had like 4 exits. So they already know the process. They already know like the steps, and you can't skip the steps of being a startup. So if you haven't gone through those steps before, someone's going to wait for you to figure out all those stupid things that they don't tell you. And like they tell you, like, write a pitch deck with these 10 slides. No, because if you do that, you just look like everyone else. So you have to actually find your own way to stand out and not look like everyone else. So, but what was cool is like, I have a lot of friends. I've been in tech for a while. So I showed 10 of my most curmudgeon-y friends Living Spec. And it resulted in 5 people writing checks to invest in us in an angel round, which was really cool because they were all like, I need that. And there were people like me who'd kind of become accidental product owners or product managers, like tech people who had started companies and they needed this. And so they're like, here's a check. And, it was just like 100K for our first round, which was enough to realize that we needed to figure out how to spend money more effectively and how to like build a business. And then this year, we raised a pre-seed round of around 500K. And that came to be by someone who we rejected previous year. So last year, someone offered us a lot of money on really poor terms. And we're like, no. And he's like, well, all right, well, come back when you figured it out. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll come back in 6 months. We're going to like achieve this. This is our roadmap. And we'll talk then. And so when we came back, we had achieved that plus like all of this. And he was like, wow, like you actually did what you said you would do. And then some. I'll invest on your terms. So that was pretty cool. So a lot of times a no at one moment in time isn't a no permanently. It's just kind of like this is not the right time or this is not the right fit for you, but maybe it will be in the future. So very rarely does a VC truly want to tell you no. And very rarely do you want to tell a VC no permanently because like things can change over time. And but there's a lot of so many funny stories. Like you'll have a conversation with someone and they'll be like asking all the right questions and you're riffing on each other. And they're like, oh yeah, I write really big checks and this is like the perfect company for me. And then a week later, like, there's like a cloud in the sky today. So I'm a no. I'm like, what? Like, well, I woke up and I saw my shadow. So no, I can't invest in Living Spec, It's just like really random answers. Like, well, the best one was we had this VC firm and they like wanted to invest, right? Cool. Like, okay, so could you and your founder move to Boise, Idaho? Like, what? Like, and they're like, well, we just got our new big limited partner for our new fund. And they're like, they want to invest in Idaho-based startups. So could you move there? No, like Idaho is not where I want to live. And no, like it was just, but like you get really weird random requests. You just kind of got to get used to like the stuff and roll with it and just kind of laugh with it. So we're right now working on our seed round, but we're not raising yet because as soon as you say you're raising, then everyone starts to say no. So what you have to do is like get enough people, like 10 times the number of people you need that you think are going to say yes, and then you raise because otherwise, like you won't raise. So how do you get a seed round? Well, there's sort of in our space, there's like 2 metrics there's 3 ways to get a seed round. One is you've already done enough startups that people just write you a check and they don't care. That's one way. That's not us. Second way is you've got so much revenue that they don't care. So they're like, oh, you've got this much. So say you've got even like as little as like 10K ARR, $10,000 a year in recurring revenue. That's probably enough if it's done in a enough amount of time for people to write a seed check. Or the third way is like, oh, you've got like 10,000 monthly active users. Cool, like we'll invest in that. You're growing. And that, again, achieved in like a relatively short amount of time, like going from 0 to 10,000 users, like maybe a year or less. So we're kind of pursuing both avenues to see which one happens first, but they're both going to happen probably in Q1. So we're just kind of like greasing the wheels on both to see which one lands first, and then we'll do our seed round. So for example, we have like, our product's free, but we have an early subscriber program, which people are starting to sign up for, where we say like, look, pay us $20 a month per person and we'll give you extra help. We'll give you a t-shirt, we'll give you some swag, and you're helping us out, right? And like, that's, who knows if that works, but it's worked enough that we've got people paying us for a free product, which is kind of cool. Do you have a question?
I have a question. So for Q1, there's like that you want to focus on a few key metrics. So what are these?
That's what I'm saying. I'm telling you those metrics right now. So basically the metric is either you've got this much revenue or you've got this user growth. Now there are other metrics that we share with our investors. So there is like the concept of how active are your active users, right? Are they active every day? Are they like on your product all the time? And you have to figure out for your product which metrics actually matter. And then what you need to do is sort of, there's this nice article by David Sachs, who does Craft Ventures from a month or two ago. And he talks about like all the SaaS metrics that really matter. And there's another guy, David, I think it's Sue, it's HSU. He was an early Facebook person, and he also writes about like metrics for knowing that you have product market fit. All the metrics are trying to figure out how well do you know your customers, and are you building a product that they will use sustainably and it won't just fall off a cliff after a while. So like, have you built a product that people have to keep using? Do they want to keep using it? So you're just trying to figure out what those metrics are for your startup. So one of those is like churn rate, but what does churn rate actually mean for a product that's free? Does it mean they stopped logging in? Does it mean they're using the product less? Does it mean they've stopped paying you? And it's different for different types of organizations. But so for us, a lot of it is the percentage of highly active users to active users. So like a monthly active user, they logged in once. A active user for us is they use the product at least 3 days a week, because that to us is sort of like, okay, they were in the product at least 3 days a week. That means they're using it, but we don't have to live in this product. It's not like their email client where it's always open. So we know it's somewhere in between. So yeah, go ahead.
What's retention for, let's say, like first week and first month?
I would say we don't know yet for ourselves what the right number is there, because a lot of people sign up, and like when someone signs up, within a couple of weeks if they're actually going to use the product, or if they just tried it out and they're not interested. So I feel like you have to kind of ignore the first week of someone using a product, and then you start to see interesting stuff. So we have, I would say like 10 to 20% of our users are super active. Like they're using it regularly for everything. We have another block of say 50% of users who are using it casually. And then we have other people who are just kind of kicking the tires. Maybe they're not interested. Maybe they just tried it once. They don't care.
How do you estimate how much you want to raise, and how much actually you want to dilute?
Yeah. So there's how much do you raise and how do you dilute? Okay. So that is the question that no one has the one right answer to. So it's different for each company. But there's a few different ways to think about it. One is you raise so much money that everyone's scared of you. That's not us. Like we're not that important. But there are companies who will, like I have a friend, he has a company, and for their seed round, I guess they called it Series A, but it was their first round. They raised 100 million on a $1.1 billion valuation. And he's one of our angel investors. They wrote a check for like 35K. But what you have to realize is he had another company that he kind of folded into this one. And that company had like $250 million a year in revenue. And they were just recapitalizing their company. But that sent a statement of like, don't mess with this company. They've got plenty of money, leave them alone. That is one way to raise. Another way to raise is like raise as little as you actually need to get you to the next phase. So, all right. So for us, after a seed round is Series A. Series A typically means in our space, you need to have somewhere between $1 to $3 million in annual revenue. And you need to achieve that within 12 to 24 months. And if you take longer than that, or you don't get to that level of revenue, you won't raise a Series A. So you'll be done. So how much do we need to get to a Series A? And a lot of that is how much is it going to cost to build out the software we need? How fast do we need to grow? How much do we need to spend on marketing? And trying to come up with an estimate that gets you there. Now, if we raise less than 2, people will say, well, that's not really a seed round. And if we raise more than 10, people would probably say that's not really a seed round. So you're trying to raise as much in that 2 to 10 range as you can on the biggest valuation you can. But if the valuation is too large and you don't hit those metrics, then you're going to need to go ask for more money at the same or lower valuation. And then you're going to end up really hurting yourself. So you actually don't want like an unjustifiable valuation, or else basically you'll never raise again. So for us, we probably want to raise like $3 to $5 million on something where we give up like 10 to 20% of the company compared to what's there now. If we give up more than that, then we probably don't have enough left later on, right? And if we give up less than that, then we've probably created such a high valuation that we probably can't justify the next round. So like there's this, it's just like this weird, and no one will give you a straight answer. So you kind of just got to figure it out for yourself. But it's always about like, so one of my friends like, look, you figure out what it takes to go public, and then you go like backwards. And like, it's ridiculous, but really all we can think about is like seed to Series A. And if we think about anything else, we're going to like hurt our heads. So it's not going to work. Yeah. I don't know, maybe there are better ways to do it. Some people seem to have figured it out more efficiently than I have, but, and we talk about this stuff all the time. There's no right answer, but we know that like expecting to raise like 2 on 10 with 0 experience isn't going to happen. Even if you have a nice working demo, if you don't have customers or you don't have revenue, it's not going to happen. So you use the money. What you have to think about is you're raising money, so you can put that capital to use so that you can create a return on that investment, so you can build the company faster than if you hadn't raised the money. If you don't have anywhere to spend the money that's going to build your business better, why are you raising it? Because then you don't need it. Like maybe you have a truly organic bootstrappable business that doesn't need venture capital, and that's what most businesses are. But a company like this to succeed actually needs to grow pretty rapidly. Otherwise, someone else will come along and raise $100 million and build what we're building and get there faster. So we like, what do we want to spend our money on? We spend our money on development, we spend our money on design, and we spend a little bit of money on marketing. And eventually we'll spend a higher percentage on marketing when we get the product far enough along that it's worth marketing on scale. We're looking for great TypeScript engineers, and like the Jobberty site, which we posted on, has like 600 active like engineer postings. So like, go ahead, yeah.
I have a question. You said something really interesting. So
I did. That's amazing.
You focus most of your resources on engineering, then design, and then marketing. So shouldn't be other way around? Because at the beginning you really have no idea. So you talk about a particular problem that 2 of you had, and you felt that you really want to find a solution to it. But that absolutely doesn't mean that other people or significant amount of people have that need that they're willing to pay you money. And then you really need to test the market, to people, because like, all right, maybe there's Notion. Now you have Microsoft Loop. Tool. So there are so many different things that you really need to find niche to kind of be able to solve the problems. Otherwise, you can run into an issue where you spend like 2 years building something, spending so much money,
Yes.
and then no one wants to buy.
Yes, that is a fair point. I cheat a little bit, so I know lots and lots of people. Like we're like, hey, I wonder if Brendan Eich would use this, like the creator of JavaScript. So I like drop Brendan a message, and he responds back. He's like, I'm too busy right now, but like it looks really cool. You should keep going with it. Like, but I've talked with hundreds of people that meet like our product market fit, and just talk to them in depth about what would you use? What do you like about Notion? What do you hate about Notion? And I early on picked like the people that I think hate everything. And I showed them an early version, like, what do you think? And I expect everyone to be like, this is crap. But I actually kind of like this. You should go with this. So we had enough feedback from people that I think would normally reject everything, who weren't just like, hey, Dylan, I think you're cool, I want to use this, but like, I hate all software, but I actually could use this, to know that we were on a good path. And then, we have both been like practitioners in this space long enough that we have good instincts and good opinions, but we also know that we don't know everything. Like we look at, I could give you a critique of like every product on the market and where they fit in and where they'll succeed and where we have to compete with them and where we could collaborate with them and where we think we fit in. But I think there's this like obsession we have to like removing friction from the process. That's where we kind of make a difference. And for us, it's not like there's one magical feature that's going to make a difference. It's like the hundreds of little details we do where people are like, wow, it was so easy to create a page, or wow, I pasted a list in from Word and it just worked, which doesn't ever happen in any product, right? And people see these things and that's what gets them excited. So it's like all these little things that we've kind of perfected. And we only know that because we've been so I've been waiting for like 20 years for a product like this to exist. And then you hear about your Notions and Codas and Confluences and Loops and all these things, and you try them out, and you're like, oh, great. And like, yeah, like Living Spec isn't still like the, oh yeah, like that's perfect. But it's like on that path of like, wow, I can really see how this is going to make that different. So I talk to a lot of people, and I put the product in front of them, and I get their feedback, and they tell me what's crap, and they tell me what's good. And one of my friends who ended up writing a check for 25K, I expected to absolutely hate it. He was like an early Gmail engineer, and he was like really particular, and he's like, I really like this, here's some money. And by the way, here's 5 pages of thoughtful feedback on what you need to do differently to make me use this regularly. And no one gives you that level of feedback if they don't see promise in it. They just say, oh yeah, it's a cool product, thanks, man. And then you never hear from them again. But when someone takes that level of effort and it happens over and over again, you're like, okay, we have an unmet need that we need to solve. Follow up?
And do these people ask you for some numbers, like how many users, what's retention, so
Investors, yeah.
More concrete number, because in our case, we started around 2018 late. We raised like over 33 million euros, and every single step, it's like just plain numbers. That
Yeah.
In the beginning, it's like potential, but as you go, it's just sheer numbers. And then I'm
Yep.
wondering, is it the same for
Yeah. So like at some point you go from metrics don't matter to metrics are everything. And I think that's kind of around Series A is when that flip happens. Like, yeah, people want to see that we have some user growth and it kind of looks like this. And, and then they're happy, or they want to see some revenue growth and it kind of looks like, a little bit steeper of a curve. Yeah, like a hockey stick, I can't draw with my hand, but the shape. And they want to see that. But then at some point, you're going to have a bad month or a bad quarter. And is it because why, right? So they want to know why your metrics don't look like they should, and so on. So I mean, you said you raised 33 million. So like you've been through this then. Yeah. And so like we haven't actually been through that yet. So we don't know what's going to happen at that point. But we know that like to get to that point, we roughly know what we have to do. Because we have enough people who've told us the same thing. So like I've probably talked to about maybe like 250 VCs now, like a big network, lots of people to talk to. And I don't go in saying, hey, we're raising 2 on 10, give us a check now. I go in saying, hey, we're doing this. I've never raised before. What do I need to know? And so I ask for a lot of advice. And a lot of times you ask for advice, you get a check, which is kind of interesting. But other times you actually just get good advice, which is like, well, I wouldn't invest, but in order for my friend to invest, you would need to do X, X, and X. And it turns out those things are pretty common, at least in our space. Yeah. So what's your startup, or what's your company?
So it's a German-based company. So we try to digitalize German construction industry.
Oh wow, yeah.
So
yeah,
it's quite an interesting topic, and I remember like back then we almost closed our business like twice because we were like risking to run money, but we did it on purpose because we had like plenty of different deals that we wanted to close, but we really wanted to go and push for the investors who wanna push us forward to show us the path, because like there's a lot of like professional investors and they saw company like us many times, and we really wanted that kind of a deal where they can just show us path, because we can go and bounce like back and forth, but that doesn't really work. And then through that exercise, even though it was like 10x tougher than just picking like first offer that come to our
right.
Yeah, so
yeah. For us, so we have really been focused on particular types of VCs that we want at this stage. We want people who actually add value without telling you what to do. And so we have like one VC, and he's super annoying I've told him this, so if he watches this, he'll know. Super annoying until he wrote the check. And then all of his scrutiny turned into like tons of helpful research and like, hey, check this out. Hey, I found the 10 most popular product manager Slack groups. You should go join them so they know about Living Spec by the time you're ready. And like, that's super helpful. It would have taken me like 5 hours to track that information down. Instead, he just did the work for us. So like finding people who will do your work for you and give you a check is really nice. Finding people who will like tell you you suck and you're doing terrible, and they're trying to grind out a better deal from you in the next round, are not the type of people we want. So I get it. Yeah, that's cool. I actually did some consulting for a US-based construction management company called Built. And it's an interesting space because it was such an industry where like everything was like, oh, we're building a $20 million building, here's a check. And then like, but then like, you don't know if the building's going to get built or not. So now the construction industry has software like yours, which says like, all right, you finished this part. Now we'll release the funding for that and kind of make it more predictable, which is make it actually more like a software project, which is kind of cool. So we are looking, we write, there's job posting, but we're very open about what we do. We just kind of tell our story. And we don't really know what we want from an employee other than we want them to be able to help with some of the stuff we do. And so our expectations are kind of flexible because we know that someone who's like helping part-time versus someone who's helping full-time, or someone who's making a little bit of money versus a lot of money, is going to be quite a different role. And we just know we need help and we're looking for it. And so we're just kind of open-minded, I would say. So, you know, this is my son again. He does parkour. He's really into it. And, you know, that's like the kind of chance you need to take with us, right? It's like, just go for it. And like, there's a trampoline there. You didn't just fall into a pit of lava or something. So anyway, we do lots of ridiculous stuff to stand out, but we have t-shirts. So again, questions are open. We've already been doing a lot of questions. I think I'm going to end the live stream though, so I can kind of like turn these lights off and do that. So if you're watching at home, thanks for joining us, and feel free to sign up for the beta at livingspec.com, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks.